A small Cambridge inn called the White Horse. The Reformation came.
Restless is raw, unscripted, reformed radio.
Read more books. Welcome. It's Reading Restless. It's that time where we discuss what we read. I don't know how long we'll do this, because especially with this topic, because it may not be very useful to you, the listener. But Pastor Michael, welcome. Hello, my dear reading friend. How's your reading going this 2025 in general?
It's going pretty well. I've not been reading a lot, admittedly, but I have kept on track with Reading Restless. What we're going to have to talk about, what's the next thing? Because I need to make sure I'm reading the right book for it.
We will talk about what the next thing is. I will say my 2025 reading is going great.
Yeah.
I feel like I am just reading just absolute banger after banger. I am having a great reading year. And we're going to discuss 2 books, or even 3. Sorry, everybody, that have been going into it. But the beautiful thing about Reading Restless is there's always time for you to join in.
That's right.
Absolutely. You don't need to feel like you're missing out. Though, since this last month has been reading a book you already owned, you're going to feel like you missed out because you probably didn't own the books I'm about to promote. But now, here in March, you can go get those books to your heart's desire. Pastor Michael, here, this next month, we are beginning a book on systematic theology.
Okay. And this is the one where we said, okay, we're not going to read it all at once.
We aren't, because you and I have indicated, I assume you're still on board with this, I plan on reading Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Faith.
Yeah, and I have started again. Now, admittedly, I'm not starting from the beginning, because just somewhat recently in the last couple of years, I had kind of started to pick up going through it. So I don't remember exactly where I'm at, but I'm not super far into it. I'm not like on volume 2, but I'm a fair bit into book 1, and I just wasn't gonna restart at the beginning. But I have started. I've been reading once in a while.
So if you, unlike Pastor Michael, aren't going to cheat and you're going to read this thing cover to cover. Now, I learned in one of the audiobooks I listened to, that there are a number of reading plans of how to read through this book in a year, or, in a certain amount of times. And I want to say this. I don't know why. This is just Providence, everyone. TGC, I don't know how old this is, years ago put out a reading plan to read the entirety of Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion. It's a 43-week reading plan. The day you are listening to this podcast, when it comes out, there are 43 weeks left in the year.
Perfect.
I will share that reading plan. That's pretty much the one I think I'm going to follow. Awesome. I have no idea why a 43-week reading plan exists.
It's literally exists for this podcast, man.
It exists. It exists for this podcast.
God in his providence was having somebody put that together, and they were like, I don't want it to go off 52 weeks. Let's go 43. And it was for this moment.
It was for this week. God foreordained you to read the Calvin's Institutes of the Christian Religion.
He foreordained Reading Restless.
That's right. And so I look forward to that. Hopefully people will join with us. We'll probably do if I read things that are interesting, I'll try and tweet about it. But Pastor Michael, this last month was reading a book you've already owned. This was that get up, you have that book on your shelf, or books on your shelf that have just been sitting there.
Yes.
That you should have been reading, that you should have read, that you haven't. Now, can I tell you what I hope this caused everyone to learn? This would be the thing. And I want to have this as long as we do Reading Restless, which who knows how long that will last, or this podcast will last. But so I will actually just have to say I will do it personally. Here's what's so great about this category is what it feels like for me is you have better taste in books than you remember having. At least I do.
I hope so, right? I hope so.
you get these books and you go, I know this would be so good to read, and then for whatever reason you are distracted, you just look at X, you get other books, but actually working through the books that you've said you really wanted to read are worth it.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I will discuss the 3 things in this category that I did, or I'll just mention them. I'll ask Pastor Michael what in this category he had. My first one, which is the one I mentioned, was Out of the Ashes: Rebuilding American Culture by Anthony Esolen. I listened to an audiobook I've had for a really long time, which was Colin Hansen's biography of Timothy Keller, which, by the way, folks, we may be talking about on its own, because I'm pretty convinced to understand where things ended with Tim Keller before he passed away and in the Reformed and PCA world today, maybe one of the most important books. And I haven't quite finished it yet, but I have been reading Till We Have Faces by C.S. Lewis, which I would like to call upon all the C.S. Lewis bros and ask, why didn't anyone tell me this is probably his best book and it may not even be close?
Yep.
Do you agree with that? I mean, I don't know if you've read this book.
I think it is by far the superior thing that he's written. Now, not everybody agrees with that, obviously, but he himself,
he's written many great things. Like, it's fine. He
himself believed this was his greatest work, and
he did.
And all of it, yeah, we do need to talk about this. I will read it again just to talk about it with you because I love it that much. It is one of my favorite books ever, for sure. It has revolutionized my life. But like, if you've read any C.S. Lewis outside of this, you see every other thing that he's ever written shows up in this book, right? Yeah. It is a magnum opus of everything, all of like the seed of everything that he has written. It's all there.
Yeah, I want to finish it. I want to
I can't wait till you finish it, because this literally happened the first time I read this book. I know we're getting off track, but I have
no, we're not. This is a book I had on a shelf.
There you go. Okay. Yeah. The first time I read this book, I got to the end and I said, I don't understand what I just read. And so I read it again.
Wow.
And by the end of the second time, I was like, I don't know that I quite have my hand on it yet, but that's one of the most profound things I've ever read. That's how I felt. Yeah. And then I read it a third time and I was like, this is, in fact, one of the greatest books I can imagine reading.
I have had a growing sense that this is his best book. I think that there are probably two reasons. Now, I haven't finished it, everybody. One, you begin to understand, like the Chronicles of Narnia. It is, it's kind of I don't know what the right word for that is that it is not a fable, but it is like
it's a myth. I mean, it literally is. It is a retelling of the myth of Cupid and Psyche. And so it is his myth. It is
a myth. And it has a message. Yeah. And there are points where that kind of becomes clear. But, and maybe it's because I'm familiar with the Chronicles of Narnia, maybe this is the experience a child has when they first read the Chronicles of Narnia, I have no idea where this story is going to go.
Oh, and I can't wait because you don't.
So it's not like reading just one of his straight apologetic works, because I don't know what is going to happen in this book.
Yeah.
So I don't know so then what that means is, even if I'm kind of picking up on some of the things, that also means I don't know the point he's going to make. I don't know what the cash out lesson is going to be.
Yes.
So it works as a story on it. So, anyways, so greatly enjoying that book. But Pastor Michael, what in this category were you reading or listening to in this wonderful month? So, by the way, March is here. If you'd like to pick up Till We Have Faces, now you're welcome to do so.
Yes. So I read 2 books actually. I finished 2 books that I've had. That and then I did start another one that would be included in this list, I guess. But the first one that I finished and read was No Country for Old Men
Oh yeah, you mentioned. I
by
remember you
Cormac
said that.
McCarthy, which is a very different book than what you read. So obviously fiction. Cormac McCarthy, I don't yet understand. Almost everybody I respect when it comes to like understanding the literary world thinks that Cormac McCarthy is brilliant. And I don't get me wrong, in reading this book, I thought this is really like his writing style is captivating and interesting, and the characters he builds really interesting. Really liked it. I did get a sense that I'm just missing something in that, like, I think he's trying to do something and communicate something that I'm not quite there with, right? Not on the like brilliant level of Till We Have Faces, but in an analogical way. There's something going on here that I'm not quite putting together. So it's an interesting story about a man that he's hunting and he comes across basically a drug deal gone bad where there was a shootout, and he finds a bunch of money, and then it's him on the run. And honestly, it has this feel from the very beginning of almost like a kind of Greek myth, like somebody who steals fire from the gods, right? Like that's how I felt this whole time. And I don't know if that was the intent, but that's how I felt about this story. Because there's also then it's a lot of like basically like fate and death is going to catch up with him. And you just get this like foreboding feeling that is where this is all heading. But it's also then with that, there's a kind of cultural commentary about it that comes from the sheriff in the book. And so it's really interesting. I did like it. I don't know that everybody has to read it, right? Like it's not that kind of book. It didn't it didn't really affect me in that way. But I did enjoy the process of reading it. So I was glad to finish that one up. I also finished a book that's more in keeping with some of the stuff we talk about, which was An Offering of Uncles by Robert Capon. And this have you read this?
Nope.
Have you ever heard of Capon?
Nope.
I think I'm saying his name right. You would love him.
Okay.
You would love this book. It's kind of hard to get, but you need to talk to a guy in our presbytery. So we'll talk about Ron, who's been on the podcast, actually. So he's been on here. He apparently found a way to get a bunch of these. It's out of print, so it's hard to find and expensive online. But apparently he found a way that you can like legally print a bunch of them. So he has them through his nonprofit. And so you should talk to him and you can get one. But it is a great book, super interesting. I have no doubt reading it, by the way, that somebody like Doug Wilson was influenced by this man because of the writing style. How he writes is fun. It's interesting. It's like he's clearly having fun with it. But it's a book. It's called An Offering of Uncles, and it's about the priesthood of Adam and really the priesthood of mankind. What's man for? Is taking the stuff of the world and lifting it up to God as a kind of oblation, and in so doing, creating history and meaning and purpose. And I can't like just rattle off the top of my head like more than that to get you to understand what the book's about, because it winds around a lot.
Sure.
But basically the idea of like mankind's purpose being, in some ways ruined in the fall, only coming back to us in Christ, with this ability to make the otherwise like not purposeless world, but like the world was made for us to give it meaning. Like a garden was made for us to garden, and in so doing, create food that's going to be eaten and flowers that are going to be smelled and enjoyed and looked at and be brought into a home. And in doing all this, this is a kind of priestly act as we lift up the things of the earth to the Lord in an act of worship. But he does so in a way that is very enjoyable. a lot of kind of cultural criticism involved in it,
Yeah.
and really enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So so that, I mean, that's very in the similar vein of
Yes, it
Out
is.
of the
Yeah.
Ashes, which is one of the best books I've read on the state of, like, how, if you're thinking like, how do I think about America for this
Yeah.
purposes of evangelism, um in my case church planning, just in general, I think Out of the Ashes is such a great book.
Yes.
Anthony Esolen is I'm learning, is a fascinating Roman Catholic thinker.
Yes.
I will be certainly reading, or at least listening to, a number of his books after this. I think this book would be an excellent book to like read with a group of people.
Yes.
And so the book is, he's a very good writer. So one, it's a very enjoyable read.
Yes.
But it begins with this idea of like, um, everyone always talks about how things are worse. He's like, one of the great things you get to do when you're a civilized person is complain about the downfall of civilization. And so
it's so good.
and so he's like, am I just doing that? Am I just doing the like thing everybody always does? Well, the new kids' music is worse.
Yep.
I mean, I don't even know what
Kierkegaard, the worst thing that ever happened was the invention of the printing press, and now anybody can publish, and how everything has gotten worse since oral tradition.
Yeah. And so so he wants to argue why he is not just in that there's actually something you should really believe that has been lost in specifically American and Western culture. And even better, he's actually trying to be helpful, saying, here are things to do to experience those things we've lost. Here are things we can do to rebuild.
So good. This was the thing that really like cemented that book for me, in that it's one of the few books I've read that does that cultural criticism. How did we get here? And then gives specific and quite a bit of like, here's ways you could start changing this right now, like today.
Yes. And so he covers things from restoring truth telling, a sense of beauty, what it would mean to have a actual school again, a college, manhood, womanhood. Again, we just reacted to the TGC's thing on embodied motherhood, right? Men and women having to serve together. He offers a much more compelling view of what manhood and womanhood are.
Yes.
Right. The manhood one is the title of the chapter is Repudiating the Sexual Revolution, Restoring Manhood. And that title's okay. But the womanhood one, this is such a good chapter title. Restoring Womanhood, Building Homes, Not Houses.
Yes. Wonderful.
That it's such a nourishing idea, right? Making good things, bringing play back, and restoring actual what real politics would be. I think this is the kind of book that would be so helpful and fascinating to read with people. There were just some women in our house last night, and they were discussing in a college class having to look at ugly art and discuss it.
Right.
And just thinking about the just ugliness.
Right.
Why do we live in a time where instead of attempting to produce what the masters produced in the Middle Ages, why do we produce and look at this? And as I was thinking about this, again, I thought of his book. I think one of again, when you start thinking about this, you need to think really carefully, because you can't just say, well, we are immoral. If you read about some of the lives of the masters, they were not moral.
Right. So, I mean, the greatest artists that you know of, like some of the greatest musicians, the greatest, movie makers of our day, you would not be like, wow, I hope my kids turn out like this, and yet have been able to create.
But why? So why? And so then what that means, the best part of that is what that means is now you could do that, but it's lazy. the lazy thing, and he does not do this, is you would just say, well, they're immoral, so they make ugly things. But it's actually a cultural thing, because for some reason in the Middle Ages, some of them similarly immoral people produced the David, produced stunning art.
Right.
Today we're like, here's 3 boxes on a sheet.
Right. Here's a banana taped to the wall.
And then it has to do with actually the like ugliness of what we believe about reality.
Yeah. And the reason you're forcing college to look at it and try to enjoy it in some way is to destroy your spirit and to harm your soul. Like literally.
and so he can do that kind of, and better, cultural criticism.
Yes.
But then he says, do you know how we start? We start working our way back. We sing. We learn to sing, and we learn to sing beautiful songs. And he's like, because they can't take your voice. They can't take the human voice, which is the most beautiful thing, from us.
Yeah.
And all the chapters work this way. And so it is a book I will hopefully read with people someday, because it is such a nourishing view of a Christian world, of being human, of things that would actually be compelling.
Yeah, I have this desire. You and I were a part of a group that was called Nostoi that did some reading on basically, different issues. And it was just a short time, mostly, pastors and some others that were involved in this for a time a few years ago. And my goal has been ever since to just do that locally with groups of people. I haven't been able to do it yet, but I've just kept the books that we read and I've been adding to it. And this is one of the books that's on the shelf with all the other books that I'm like, we're going to read these with whatever group I'm able to put together to think more deeply about how to rebuild a truly good and Christian culture.
So those are the things that I read. I would love to know if you read something that was sitting on your shelf. You have better books on your shelf than you know. I hope so. If hopefully not,
I'm
if
so
you do
sorry.
Reading Restless in the future, you will. Yeah, I'm sorry if you don't. I'm sorry if your books are trash. I can't help you, man. This month was no help. But next month, and for the next 43 weeks, you could begin reading The Institutes of the Christian Religion, which you can get for free. You don't even need to buy a copy. I'd recommend buying a copy because, come on, there's like $18 copies of this 800-page book. So it's not that expensive. I mean, I don't know how they're making money printing and shipping you that book for that price.
Right.
We know John Calvin's not pulling royalties from it. That might be a significant part of that explanation as I talk through that out loud.
All right, we're making a Restless version, version of the Institute.
Reading Restless, with an intro by me saying, "Did you know you can read this book in 43 weeks?" Just like part of my preface. If you try, you can find a way to do it. Here is a reading plan for 43 weeks, 37 weeks, 11 weeks, and 1 week. Perfect. But read with us. It's Reading Restless, everybody.